The morning I realized my life had become unrecognizable started like any other Tuesday in late September. The air carried that crisp edge that signals autumn's arrival, and I could smell the faint scent of smoke drifting through our neighborhood as someone nearby had lit their fireplace for the first time that season. I was standing at my kitchen sink, warm water running over my hands as I rinsed breakfast dishes, watching through the window as golden leaves spiraled down from the oak tree in our front yard. The sunlight filtered through those leaves in a way that should have felt peaceful, but something in my chest felt tight, like a knot that had been slowly forming for months without my full awareness. My husband, Daniel, had already left for work. His coffee mug still sitting on the counter with a faint brown ring at the bottom. I'd picked it up, feeling the ceramic cool against my palm, and added it to the sudsy water. That's when I heard the knock at the door. Not a friendly tap, 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 but a firm, deliberate series of thuds that made my shoulders tense immediately. I dried my hands on the dish towel, a faded blue one with tiny white flowers that Daniel's mother Patricia had given us as a housewarming gift 3 years ago when we'd moved to Millbrook, her hometown. I should have known then, I suppose. I should have recognized the pattern of those knocks, the particular rhythm that Patricia used, as if she owned not just her own home, but every threshold in this small Pennsylvania town. But I was still naive enough to think that family meant something, that marriage vows extended some kind of protection, that being Daniel's wife would shield me from whatever darkness lurked beneath Patricia's practiced smile. I opened the door to find not just Patricia, but 3 other women from the neighborhood standing on my porch. The autumn air rushed in, carrying the scent of someone's laundry detergent and the earthy smell of fallen leaves. Patricia stood front and center, her silver hair perfectly styled in that helmet-like way she maintained, wearing a cream-colored cardigan that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. Behind her stood Margaret from 2 houses down, Linda, who ran the local book club, and Susan, whose daughter was in the same kindergarten class as my son Tyler. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. But I'd spent 3 years trying to convince myself I was imagining the coldness there. "Good morning, Emma," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used, sweet as honey on the surface, but with something sharp underneath, like biting into a beautiful apple only to find it rotten at the core. "We need to have a conversation with you. May we come in?" The way she phrased it, "may we come in," was purely theatrical. She was already moving forward, and the other women followed like a small army, their shoes clicking against my hardwood floors. I caught a whiff of Patricia's perfume, something expensive and floral that always seemed too strong, too insistent, filling up whatever room she entered. My heart started beating faster, that fight or flight response kicking in even though I couldn't have articulated why. These were just neighbors, just my mother-in-law, just women from my community. What threat could they possibly pose on a Tuesday morning in my own home? I closed the door, and the sound of it clicking shut felt ominously final. "Can I get anyone coffee?" I asked, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, of hospitality, even as my instinct screamed that something was very wrong. The kitchen still smelled like the cinnamon toast I'd made for Tyler before walking him to the bus stop, a comforting scent that now felt jarringly out of place. "This is a social call," Patricia said, settling herself onto my couch as if it were a throne. The other women arranged themselves around my living room, and I noticed how they positioned themselves between me and the front door. I remained standing, my back near the kitchen, my hands unconsciously gripping the back of one of my dining chairs, though it felt solid under my fingers. Real! Something to anchor myself to. Patricia folded her hands in her lap, and I watched her knuckles, how they pressed white against her skin. "Emma," she began, and I noticed how the other women leaned forward slightly, like an audience waiting for performance to begin. "There have been some concerns raised about your behavior, about your fitness as a mother, about your stability." The words hit me like cold water. I actually felt my body temperature drop, felt goosebumps rise on my arms despite the warmth of the house. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, and I hated how my voice came out, thin and uncertain, not strong and indignant like it should have been. Margaret spoke up then, her voice apologetic, but her eyes avoiding mine. "I've noticed Tyler wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row, and he's mentioned being hungry after school several times." My mind raced. Tyler was 5 years old and going through a phase where he wanted to wear his favorite dinosaur shirt constantly. I washed it every other night, but yes, he wore it frequently because he loved it. And hungry after school? He was a growing boy who ate snacks the moment he got home, like every other kindergartner on the planet. Linda chimed in next. And I've seen you at the grocery store looking, well, she paused delicately, disheveled, confused. You forgot your wallet last week. You seemed disoriented. I had forgotten my wallet. Once. I'd left it on the kitchen counter and had to drive back home to get it, apologizing profusely to the cashier. It was embarrassing, but hardly evidence of instability. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Susan was already talking. Tyler told my daughter that you sometimes cry in your car, that you sit in the driveway for a long time before coming inside. That one landed differently because it was true. I had cried in my car. Twice in the past month, I'd sat in the driveway after grocery shopping, overwhelmed by exhaustion and a loneliness I couldn't quite name, and I'd let myself have 5 minutes to fall apart before putting on my mom face and going inside. Tyler must have been watching from the window. The thought of my son seeing me like that, of him mentioning it to other children, made my cheeks burn with shame. Patricia stood up then, and I noticed how she'd orchestrated this whole thing. She let the other women present their evidence first, softening me up, making me defensive. Now she moved in for what I would later understand was the kill. Emma, she said, her voice dripping with false concern, we're worried about you. Daniel is worried about you. He's confided in me that you've been struggling, that you're not yourself, that perhaps the stress of motherhood and marriage has been too much. The room tilted slightly. Daniel had been talking to his mother about me, about our private life. The betrayal of that felt like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. When I whispered, when did he say this? Patricia's smile was triumphant, though she tried to hide it. Sweetheart, he's been concerned for months. He didn't want to hurt your feelings, but he's noticed the house isn't as clean as it used to be, that you're forgetting things, that you seem distant, distracted. He's worried you might be suffering from depression, or, she paused meaningfully, something more serious. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Something more serious. Mental illness. Instability. Unfitness. I looked at the other women, searching for an ally, for someone who would see how insane this was. But they all were the same expression, a mixture of pity and judgment that made me feel like I was drowning. I think you should see someone, Patricia continued, a professional. And perhaps, just temporarily, Tyler could stay with Daniel and me, just until you're feeling better, just until you've gotten some help. And there it was, the real agenda. Patricia wanted my son. She wanted him from the moment he was born, had made comments about how she could raise him better, how she had more experience, how Daniel had turned out so well under her care. I'd laughed off those comments, thought they were just typical overbearing grandmother behavior. I'd been so stupid. No, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I felt. Absolutely not. There is nothing wrong with me. I'm a good mother. Tyler is happy and healthy and loved. Patricia's expression hardened, the mask slipping for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. Emma, she said, and her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. I'm trying to help you. We all are. But if you're going to be difficult about this, well, there are other ways to ensure Tyler's well-being. Legal ways. The threat was clear. She was talking about calling Child Protective Services, about making official reports, about using her influence in this town, where she lived for 40 years and knew everyone, to paint me as an unfit mother. And I was an outsider here, had moved to Millbrook from Ohio when I married Daniel, had no family nearby, no deep roots, no network of people who would vouch for me. I need you all to leave, I said, my voice shaking now. Get out of my house. The women exchanged glances. Patricia stood slowly, smoothing her cardigan. We'll go, she said, but think about what we've said. Think about what's best for Tyler. And Emma, she paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Daniel will be hearing about your reaction to our concern. I'm sure he'll be very disappointed. They left, and I stood frozen in my living room, listening to their car doors slam, listening to the engine start and fade away down the street. Then I ran to the bathroom and vomited, my body purging the fear and shock and rage that had nowhere else to go. I knelt on the cold tile floor, my forehead pressed against the toilet seat, and tried to understand what had just happened. When I could finally stand, I looked at myself in the mirror. I did look tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my hair needed washing. I was wearing yoga pants and an old t-shirt, my usual stay-at-home mom uniform. Was that disheveled? Was taking care of a 5-year-old, managing a household, trying to make friends in a new town, really supposed to leave me looking like I'd stepped out of a magazine? I called Daniel. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. It rang 4 times before he answered, and I could hear the noise of his office in the background. Phones ringing, people talking. "Hey, babe," he said, and he sounded normal, cheerful even. "What's up?" "Your mother was just here," I said, and my voice cracked. "Daniel." She brought neighbors with her. She's saying I'm an unfit mother. She's threatening to take Tyler. There was a pause, and in that pause, I heard my marriage crumbling. "Emma," he said, and his voice had changed, become careful, measured. "Mom called me this morning. She told me she was going to check on you. She's worried." "I'm worried." "You're worried?" I repeated, incredulous. "Daniel, she ambushed me. She brought witnesses. She's building some kind of case against me." He sighed, and that sigh contained everything I needed to know. "Babe, you have to admit you haven't been yourself lately. You're tired all the time. You're emotional. Maybe Mom has a point. Maybe you should talk to someone." I felt something inside me go very still and very cold. "You've been talking to her about me," I said, "about our private life, about our marriage." "She's my mother," he said, as if that explained everything, as if that justified everything. "And she's just trying to help. Why are you being so defensive?" I hung up on him. I'd never done that before in our 5 years of marriage. I sat on the couch, the same couch where Patricia had sat like a queen pronouncing judgment, and I tried to think. My phone rang immediately, Daniel calling back, but I didn't answer. It rang 3 more times over the next hour, and then the text started. "We need to talk about this. You're overreacting. Call me back. Mom is just concerned. Why are you being like this?" Being like this. As if I was a problem. As if I was the one who had violated trust, who had conspired, who had brought an intervention squad into someone's home on a Tuesday morning. I picked up Tyler from the bus stop that afternoon, and I watched him run toward me with his backpack bouncing. His face lit up with joy at seeing me, and I thought about Patricia's words. Unfit, unstable, struggling. This child loved me. He was happy. He was thriving. But I was starting to understand that truth didn't matter in Millbrook. Perception mattered. And Patricia controlled the perception. That night, Daniel came home late. I'd fed Tyler dinner, given him a bath, read him 3 stories, and tucked him in. I'd done everything a good mother does, and I'd done it with a smile, even though I felt like I was moving through water, everything slow and heavy and wrong. Daniel found me in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already clean, needing something to do with my hands. "We need to talk," he said, and he sounded tired. He loosened his tie, and I noticed he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Emma, I think Mom might be right. I think you should see a therapist, just to talk through some things." I stopped wiping. The counter was cold and smooth under my palm. "What things, Daniel? What exactly do you think I need to talk through?" He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "You're not happy here. You haven't adjusted to Millbrook. You don't have friends. You're isolated, and I think it's affecting you." "I moved here for you," I said quietly. "I left my job, my friends, my family. I moved to your hometown so you could be near your mother, so Tyler could know his grandmother. And now you're using that isolation against me?" "I'm not using anything against you," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm trying to help you. We're all trying to help you. We." He'd said we. He'd aligned himself with his mother, with those women, with everyone except me. I felt something fundamental shift in that moment, like a bone breaking, like a foundation cracking. I realized I was alone in my marriage. I'd been alone for a while, probably, but I'd been too busy trying to be a good wife. A good mother, a good daughter-in-law to notice. I'll make an appointment, I said, because I needed time to think, to plan. If it will make you feel better, I'll see someone. His relief was visible, his shoulders dropping, his face softening. Thank you, he said. That's all we're asking. Just get some help. I nodded. And he came over and kissed my forehead, and his lips felt like a stranger's. He went upstairs to shower, and I stood in the kitchen and understood that I was in a war I hadn't known I was fighting. And I was losing. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. Everywhere I went in Millbrook, I felt eyes on me. At the grocery store, conversations would stop when I walked down an aisle. At Tyler's school pickup, other mothers would smile tightly and find reasons to hurry away. Someone had been talking, spreading stories, and I didn't need to guess who. Patricia had activated her network, and I was being systematically isolated. I did make an appointment with a therapist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, who practiced in the next town over. I drove 40 minutes each way, because I didn't trust anyone in Millbrook, didn't trust that anything I said wouldn't somehow make its way back to Patricia. Dr. Chun was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a calm presence that made me feel like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Tell me what brought you here, she said in our first session, and I started crying before I could even answer. I told her everything. The ambush, the accusations, Patricia's campaign, Daniel's betrayal. I talked for 50 minutes straight, and she listened without judgment, taking occasional notes. Emma, she said when I finally ran out of words, nothing you described suggests you're mentally unstable or an unfit mother. What you've described is a targeted campaign of harassment and emotional abuse. This is actually quite serious. I felt validation wash over me like warm water. You believe me? I asked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. I believe you're experiencing exactly what you say you're experiencing, she said carefully. And I think you need to start documenting everything, every interaction, every incident. Because if your mother-in-law is building a case against you, you need to build one too. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down dates, times, conversations. I noted every time Patricia showed up unannounced, every time she made a comment about my parenting, every time Daniel sided with her over me. I took photos of Tyler, happy and healthy and clean. I kept grocery receipts, showing I was feeding my family. I felt insane doing it, like I was a paranoid one. But Dr. Chun had been clear. Protect yourself. Document everything. Patricia escalated. She started showing up at our house when Daniel was at work, always with some excuse. She brought groceries because she was worried I wasn't feeding Tyler properly. She'd come to help clean because the house looked overwhelming for me. She'd offer to take Tyler for the afternoon to give me a break I hadn't asked for. And every time, she'd make little comments, observations that felt like needles. Tyler's hair is getting long, isn't it? When was his last haircut? Or, oh, you're still in your pajamas? It's almost noon, dear. I started refusing her entry. I'd talk to her on the porch, keeping the door mostly closed, my body blocking her view of the interior. This made her angry, though she tried to hide it. I'm just trying to help, she'd say, her voice tight. Why are you shutting me out? Daniel is going to hear about this. And he did. Every night. He'd come home with a new complaint from his mother. She'd called him at work, crying, saying I was keeping her from her grandson. She was worried about me, about Tyler, about our family. Why was I being so hostile? What was I trying to hide? I'm not hiding anything. I'd say, exhausted from defending myself constantly. I just need boundaries. I need her to stop showing up unannounced and criticizing everything I do. She's not criticizing, Daniel would insist. She's concerned. There's a difference. But there wasn't a difference. Not in how it felt, not in the impact it had. I was being worn down, eroded like stone under constant water. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie awake at night, listening to Daniel breathe beside me, wondering how I'd ended up married to someone who wouldn't protect me from his own mother, wondering if I'd ever really known him at all. Then came the incident at Tyler's school. I got a call from the principal, Mrs. Henderson, asking me to come in for a meeting. My stomach dropped. I knew, somehow, that Patricia was behind this too. I arranged for a neighbor, one of the few who still spoke to me, to watch Tyler for an hour, and I drove to the school with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Mrs. Henderson's office smelled like coffee and old books. She was a woman in her 60s who'd been principal at Millbrook Elementary for 20 years. She knew everyone, including Patricia. She gestured for me to sit, and I noticed there was already a file on her desk with Tyler's name on it. Mrs. Walker, she began, and I noticed she didn't smile. We've received some concerns about Tyler's home environment. I wanted to speak with you directly before taking any further action. What concerns? I asked, though I already knew. I could feel the trap closing around me. She opened the file. Tyler has mentioned to his teacher that his mother is sad a lot, that she cries. He's also said that his parents fight, that his father sleeps on the couch sometimes. And there have been observations about his appearance, his lunch contents, his general demeanor. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. Tyler is 5 years old. Yes, he's seen me cry occasionally, because I'm human and I have emotions. My husband and I have disagreed, like all couples do, and yes, he slept on the couch a few times. As for Tyler's appearance and lunch, I'd love to know what specific concerns there are, because my son is clean, well-fed, and happy. Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Walker, I'm not accusing you of anything, but when we receive reports, we have to take them seriously. We have a responsibility to ensure every child's safety. Reports, I said, plural. Who has been making these reports? She hesitated. I can't disclose that information, but I knew. Of course I knew. Patricia had been busy, had been talking to Tyler's teacher, to the school staff, planting seeds of doubt. And in a small town like Millbrook, where she was respected and established and I was the outsider, her word carried weight. I want to be very clear, I said, and I was proud that my voice didn't shake. I am a good mother. My son is loved and cared for. If there are specific concerns, I will address them. But I will not be subjected to vague accusations based on gossip. Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. I understand this is difficult. For now, we'll continue to monitor the situation. But Mrs. Walker, she leaned forward, and her voice dropped. If you're struggling, there are resources, support groups, counseling, assistance programs. There's no shame in asking for help. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been punched. Even the school, the place where Tyler spent his days, had been turned against me. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching other mothers pick up their children, laughing and chatting in groups I was no longer invited to join. I thought about driving away, just pointing the car toward the highway and never coming back. But Tyler was waiting for me. Tyler needed me. So I started the engine and drove home. That night, I told Daniel about the meeting. I expected him to be angry, to be protective, to finally see what his mother was doing. Instead, he looked worried. Emma, he said, maybe this is a sign. Maybe you do need more help than therapy once a week. Maybe we should consider, he paused, other options. Other options, I repeated. Like what, Daniel? Like me going away somewhere? Like your mother moving in? Like giving up custody of my son? Don't be dramatic, he said, but his eyes slid away from mine. I'm just saying, maybe Tyler could stay with Mom for a little while. Just until things settle down. Just until you're feeling better. And there was again the same suggestion Patricia had made months ago. I realized then that this had been the plan all along. Wear me down, isolate me, make me look unstable, and then swoop in and take my child. And Daniel was complicit. Maybe he'd been complicit from the beginning. I'm not giving up my son, I said, and my voice was ice. Not to you, not to your mother, not to anyone. Tyler stays with me. Daniel's face hardened. You might not have a choice, he said quietly. If the school makes a report to CPS, if there's an investigation, they'll look at everything. Your mental state, your ability to care for him, the environment you're providing. And Emma, he looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw a stranger, you're not exactly presenting well right now. I looked down at myself. I was wearing sweatpants and a stained shirt. My hair was in a messy bun. I hadn't put on makeup in weeks, but I'd been taking care of a 5-year-old, cleaning house, cooking meals, managing everything while being systematically undermined and attacked. What did he expect me to look like? Get out, I said. Sleep at your mother's tonight. I can't look at you right now. He left. He actually left, packed a bag, and walked out, and I heard his car start and drive away. I checked on Tyler, who was sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling, his hand curled around his favorite stuffed dinosaur. I sat on the floor next to his bed and watched him sleep, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let Patricia take my child. I was going to fight. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Torres, and she practiced family law in Pittsburgh, about an hour away. I'd found her through an online search, specifically looking for attorneys outside of Millbrook's sphere of influence. Her receptionist scheduled me for that afternoon, and I dropped Tyler at school and made the drive with my journal, my documentation, everything I'd been collecting. Rebecca's office was in a modern building with glass walls and sleek furniture. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression neutral. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. Mrs. Walker, she said, what you're describing is parental alienation and a potential custody grab. The good news is you've been documenting. The bad news is your mother-in-law has been building her case longer and more systematically than you've been building yours. What do? I asked, how do I protect Tyler? First, she said, we establish that you're a fit parent. We get statements from your therapist, from Tyler's pediatrician, from anyone who can attest to your parenting. Second, we document every instance of your mother-in-law's interference. Third, and this is important, we prepare for the possibility that your husband may file for divorce and seek custody. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been thinking of myself. You think he will? I asked. Rebecca's expression was sympathetic but realistic. Based on what you've told me, your husband has already chosen sides. And if his mother is as manipulative as you describe, she'll push him to file. She'll convince him it's for Tyler's good. And in a small town where she has influence, that could be dangerous for you. I hired her that day. It cost money. I wasn't sure we had money from a secret savings account I'd kept from my old job, money I'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. Over the next few weeks, I followed Rebecca's instructions. I got a letter from Dr. Chin stating that I was engaged in therapy, that I showed no signs of mental instability, and that I was dealing with a difficult family situation in a healthy manner. I took Tyler to his pediatrician for a checkup, and Dr. Martinez noted in his records that Tyler was healthy, well-nourished, developmentally on track, and showed no signs of neglect or abuse. I started taking photos of everything, our meals, our activities, Tyler's smiling face. I was building my own case. Daniel stayed at his mother's house. He'd come by to see Tyler, but our interactions were cold and formal. He'd look around the house as if searching for evidence of my unfitness, and I'd watch him do it with a kind of detached sadness. This was what our marriage had become. We were adversaries now, not partners. Then Patricia made her biggest mistake. She called Child Protective Services herself. I came home from grocery shopping one afternoon to find a CPS worker sitting in a car outside my house. My heart stopped. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreading. I got Tyler out of his car seat, grabbed our groceries, and walked up to my door with as much dignity as I could muster. The worker, a tired-looking woman in her 40s named Janet, introduced herself and asked if she could come inside. I let her in, my hand shaking as I unlocked the door. Tyler ran to his room to play, oblivious to the threat this woman represented. Janet walked through my house slowly, looking at everything. The clean kitchen, the organized living room, Tyler's neat bedroom with his toys put away and his bed made. She asked to see the refrigerator, and I opened it to show shelves stocked with healthy food. She asked about Tyler's routine, his school, his health. I answered every question calmly, even though inside I was screaming. Mrs. Walker, Janet said finally, sitting down at my kitchen table and gesturing for me to join her. I received a report alleging neglect and possible mental instability. But I have to tell you, I see no evidence of that here. Your home is clean and safe. Your child appears healthy and happy. Can you tell me about the person who might have made this report? I told her about Patricia. I told her everything, and I gave her copies of my documentation, my journal, the letters from my therapist and Tyler's doctor. I watched her face as she read, saw her expression shift from neutral to concerned to something like anger. Mrs. Walker, she said, this appears to be a malicious report. Unfortunately, we get them sometimes, usually in custody disputes or family conflicts. I'm going to close this case as unfounded. But I want you to know, she looked at me seriously. Whoever made this report has potentially committed a crime. Filing a false report with CPS is illegal. You might want to discuss this with an attorney. I already have one, I said, and I felt something like hope for the first time in months. After Janet left, I called Rebecca and told her what had happened. This is good, Rebecca said. This shows a pattern of harassment. And if we can prove your mother-in-law made the false report, we can potentially get a restraining order. But proving it was harder than I thought. Patricia was smart. She likely made the report anonymously or had convinced someone else to make it. We couldn't definitively tie it to her, even though we all knew the truth. Then something unexpected happened. Margaret, one of the women who'd been part of the original intervention, showed up at my door. It was a cold November evening, and I almost didn't answer when I saw her through the peephole. But something in her body language, the way she stood hunched against the wind, made me open the door. Can I come in? She asked, and her voice was small. I need to talk to you. I let her in, wary, wondering if this was another trap. She sat on my couch and started crying, and I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. I'm so sorry, she said through her tears. Emma, I'm so sorry. Patricia lied to us. She told us you were having a breakdown, that Daniel was afraid for Tyler's safety, that we needed to intervene before something terrible happened. But it wasn't true, was it? No, I said quietly. It wasn't true. Margaret wiped her eyes. I started noticing things. The way Patricia would talk about you, always with this edge of satisfaction. The way she'd bring up your name constantly, always with some new concern, some new problem. And then I saw you at the store last week with Tyler, and he was laughing, and you were laughing, and you looked like a normal mom with her kid. And I realized what I've been part of. She told me everything then. How Patricia had been planning this for over a year, since Tyler started school. How she'd been systematically talking to neighbors, teachers, anyone who would listen, planting seeds of doubt about my fitness as a mother. How she convinced Daniel that I was unstable, that he needed to protect Tyler, that the best thing for everyone would be for Tyler to live with her. How she'd orchestrated the intervention, the school meeting, the CPS report, all of it. Why? I asked, why would she do this? Margaret looked at me with something like pity, because she thinks Tyler is hers. She raised Daniel alone after her husband died, and she's never let go. When you came along, you were a threat. And when Tyler was born, she saw a chance to do it all over again, to raise another child. But this time, she wanted to do it without interference. She wanted you gone. The truth of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. This had never been about my fitness as a mother. This had been about Patricia's obsession, her need to control, her inability to let her son have his own family. And Daniel, who'd been raised by this woman, who'd been shaped by her manipulation his entire life, couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. Will you testify? I asked Margaret, will you tell a court what you just told me? She nodded. Yes, and I think Linda will too. Susan, I'm not sure about. She's still under Patricia's influence. But Linda has been having doubts. I'll talk to her. After Margaret left, I called Rebecca and told her about this development. This changes everything, Rebecca said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. With witness testimony about the mother-in-law's campaign, we can build a strong case. Emma, I think we might actually win this. But winning meant different things now. It meant divorce, certainly. It meant a custody battle. It meant Tyler growing up in a broken home, split between parents who could barely speak to each other. It meant years of legal fights and emotional damage, and a small town that would never fully accept me again. Was that winning? I didn't have time to philosophize about it, because the next day, Daniel served me with divorce papers. A process server showed up at my door, handed me an envelope, and walked away. I opened it with shaking hands and read the words that ended my marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Joint custody with primary residence to be determined. Division of assets. It was all so clinical, so cold, reducing 5 years of marriage to legal terminology. But it was the custody petition that made my blood run cold. Daniel was asking for primary custody, with me having supervised visitation. Supervised, as if I were a danger to my own child. The grounds he cited were my mental instability, my inability to maintain the household, concerns raised by school officials and community members, and a recent CPS investigation. Never mind that the investigation had been closed as unfounded. He listed it anyway, making it sound damning. I called Rebecca immediately, and she told me to come to her office. We spent 3 hours going through the petition, building our response. We had Dr. Chen's letter, Dr. Martinez's records, the CPS report showing no evidence of neglect, and now Margaret's testimony about Patricia's campaign. We had a case. But Rebecca was honest with me about the challenges. You're fighting against a man who's lived in this town his whole life, she said, whose mother is well respected, who has a stable job and a support system. You're an outsider with no family nearby, no long-term employment in the area, and a therapist letter that, while helpful, also confirms you've been in therapy. A judge might see that as evidence of instability rather than evidence of you seeking help. So what do? I asked, feeling despair creep in. We fight, Rebecca said simply. We present the truth. We show the pattern of harassment. We demonstrate that you're a loving, capable mother who's been systematically undermined by a manipulative mother-in-law. And we hope the judge sees through the smokescreen. The custody hearing was set for January, 2 months away. Those 2 months were the longest of my life. Daniel and I worked out a temporary custody arrangement where Tyler would alternate weeks between us. The first week Tyler spent at Daniel's, which meant at Patricia's house, I barely functioned. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, panicking, wondering if Tyler was okay, if Patricia was poisoning him against me, if I'd ever get him back. But when Tyler came home to me, he was still my Tyler. He'd hug me tight and tell me about his week, and there was no distance in his eyes, no fear. Whatever Patricia was doing, she hadn't turned him against me yet. That gave me strength. I used those 2 months to build my case. Margaret and Linda both agreed to testify. I gathered more documentation, more evidence. I took parenting classes, even though I didn't need them, just to show the court I was committed to being the best mother possible. I volunteered at Tyler's school, forcing myself to face the whispers and stares, showing up anyway. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let Patricia's campaign make me invisible. Dr. Chen was amazing during this time. She helped me process the betrayal, the anger, the fear. She taught me coping strategies for the stress. And she agreed to testify on my behalf, to tell the court that I was mentally stable, that I was dealing with an extraordinarily difficult situation in a healthy way, that my love for Tyler was evident and strong. December came, and with it the holidays. Tyler was supposed to spend Christmas Eve with me and Christmas Day with Daniel. I decorated the house, put up a tree, baked cookies, tried to make everything perfect, try and create memories that would sustain us through whatever was coming. Tyler helped me hang ornaments, his small hands careful with the delicate glass balls, and I took pictures of every moment, storing them away like treasures. On Christmas Eve, we made hot chocolate and watched holiday movies, and Tyler fell asleep on the couch with his head in my lap. I stroked his hair and looked at his peaceful face and thought about how Patricia wanted to take this from me, how she'd been willing to destroy me, to ruin my reputation, to tear apart my marriage, all to possess my child. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Christmas morning, Daniel picked up Tyler early. I'd wrapped presents for Tyler to open at his father's house, try and be mature about it, trying to put Tyler's happiness first. Daniel stood in the doorway, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But then Tyler came running with his coat, and the moment passed, and they were gone. I spent Christmas alone. I'd been invited to Dr. Chen's family gathering, a kind gesture that made me cry, but I declined. I needed to sit with this, to feel it, to understand what my life had become. I ate leftover cookies for lunch and watched the snow fall outside my window and thought about the hearing coming in 3 weeks. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything in my mind. What I would say, how I would present myself, what questions I might be asked. Rebecca had prepared me thoroughly, but preparation couldn't eliminate the fear. What if the judge believed Daniel? What if Patricia's influence extended to the courthouse? What if I lost Tyler? The hearing was held in the county courthouse, an imposing brick building that smelled like old wood and floor polish. Rebecca met me outside, looking professional and confident in a navy suit. "You're going to do great," she said, squeezing my hand. "Just tell the truth. That's all you need to do." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Daniel was already there with his lawyer, a man named Richard Brennan, who I knew was a friend of Patricia's. Patricia herself sat in the gallery, dressed impeccably, her face arranged in an expression of concerned grandmotherly worry. Seeing her there made my stomach turn. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Catherine Morrison. She had gray hair and sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. She reviewed the case files, asked some preliminary questions, and then we began. Daniel's lawyer went first, painting a picture of me as an unstable woman who'd never adjusted to life in Millbrook, who was isolated and depressed, who couldn't maintain her household or her appearance, who'd been the subject of a CPS investigation. He called Daniel to the stand, and I watched my husband, the man I'd loved, the man I'd married, lie under oath. He exaggerated my tears, my tiredness, my struggles. He made it sound like I was falling apart, like Tyler was at risk, like he had no choice but to seek custody. Then Rebecca cross-examined him, and I watched her dismantle his testimony piece by piece. She asked about specific incidents he'd mentioned. When exactly had he observed these things? Had he documented them? Had he expressed concern to me at the time? Daniel stumbled, contradicted himself, admitted he was mostly relaying things his mother had told him. Rebecca pounced on that. "So you didn't actually witness most of what you're testifying to? You're repeating your mother's observations?" Daniel's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Judge Morrison was watching Daniel with a more critical eye now. Then it was my turn. Rebecca called me to the stand, and I walked up on shaking legs. I swore to tell the truth, and then I told it. I told the judge about moving to Millbrook for Daniel's career, about trying to build a life in a town where I was an outsider. I told her about Patricia's constant interference, her criticism, her campaign to undermine me. I told her about the intervention, the school meeting, the CPS report. I showed her my documentation, my journal, the letters from Dr. Chun and Dr. Martinez. Mrs. Walker, Rebecca asked, "Do you love your son?" "More than anything in the world," I said, and my voice broke. "He's my whole heart. I would never do anything to hurt him. I've been fighting for him, for us, against people who want to take him from me for their own purposes." Daniel's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to make me seem emotional, unstable, vindictive. But I stayed calm. I answered every question honestly. Yes, I'd cried. Yes, I'd struggled. Yes, I'd been in therapy. But none of that made me a bad mother. It made me human. Then Rebecca called Margaret to the stand. Margaret testified about Patricia's campaign, about how she'd been manipulated into participating in the intervention, about the lies Patricia had told. She was nervous, her voice shaking, but she was credible. Linda testified next, corroborating Margaret's story. Daniel's lawyer tried to discredit them, suggesting they were biased, that they were friends of mine. But Rebecca pointed out that they'd initially been on Patricia's side, that they had no reason to lie for me now. Dr. Chin testified about my mental state, about the therapy sessions, about my love for Tyler and my commitment to being a good mother. She was professional and unshakable, and I could see Judge Morrison taking notes. Then Rebecca did something I hadn't expected. She called Patricia to the stand. Patricia looked surprised but confident as she walked up. She swore her oath and sat down, smoothing her skirt, that practiced smile on her face. Mrs. Walker, Rebecca began, and I noticed she used Patricia's married name. The same as mine. You've been very involved in your grandson's life, haven't you? Of course, Patricia said. He's my only grandchild. I love him dearly. And you've had concerns about Emma's parenting? Patricia's expression became sorrowful. Yes, I've been very worried about her. She seems so overwhelmed, so unable to cope. I've only wanted to help. Rebecca nodded sympathetically. And that's why you organized an intervention with several neighbors? Patricia hesitated. I wouldn't call it an intervention. Just a conversation among concerned people. A conversation where you suggested Emma was mentally unstable and that Tyler should come live with you? I never said, Patricia started, but Rebecca cut her off. We have testimony from 2 of the women who were present that you did say exactly that. She paused. Mrs. Walker, did you call Child Protective Services and make a report about Emma? Patricia's face went pale. I was concerned. I had a duty to report my concerns. Even though those concerns were unfounded, even though the CPS worker found no evidence of neglect or abuse. I didn't know they would find that, Patricia said, and her voice had lost its smoothness. I was acting in Tyler's best interest. Or were you acting in your own interest? Rebecca's voice was sharp now. Mrs. Walker, isn't it true that you wanted custody of Tyler since he was born? That you made comments about raising him yourself? That you've been systematically undermining Emma's relationship with her son so you could take her place? That's not... Patricia's composure was cracking. I only wanted what's best for Tyler. Rebecca presented evidence then. Emails Patricia had sent to Daniel, talking about how much better Tyler would be living with her. Text messages where she criticized my parenting. Testimony from other neighbors about comments Patricia had made. It was damning, and I watched Patricia's face as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. Judge Morrison called a recess, and we all filed out courtroom. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to process what had just happened. Rebecca had eviscerated Patricia on the stand. But would it be enough? When we reconvened, Judge Morrison looked at all of us with an expression I couldn't read. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony, she said. This is a deeply troubling case. What I see here is not a mother who's unfit to parent. What I see is a mother who's been subjected to a sustained campaign of harassment and manipulation by her mother-in-law, with the apparent complicity of her husband. I felt tears start to fall, but I didn't wipe them away. I just listened. The CPS report was unfounded. Judge Morrison continued. The medical and therapeutic evidence shows a healthy child and a mother who's actively working on her mental health. The testimony from community members shows a pattern of deliberate undermining. And frankly, she looked at Daniel. Mr. Walker, I'm disappointed that you allowed your mother to manipulate you into filing for custody based on false premises. Daniel looked down at his hands. Patricia sat rigid in her seat, her face a mask. My ruling is as follows, Judge Morrison said. Joint legal custody will be maintained, but primary physical custody will be awarded to Emma Walker. Daniel Walker will have standard visitation. And she paused significantly. Patricia Walker is prohibited from unsupervised contact with the minor child until such time as she completes a court-ordered psychological evaluation and family therapy. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges. The courtroom was silent. I couldn't breathe. I'd won. I'd actually won. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm ordering both parents to attend co-parenting counseling. This child deserves better than to be caught in the middle of adult conflicts. And Mr. Walker, she looked at Daniel sternly. I suggest you examine your relationship with your mother and consider whether her influence is healthy for you or your son. Court was adjourned. Rebecca hugged me, and I was crying too hard to speak. Daniel left quickly, not looking at me. Patricia tried to approach me, but Rebecca stepped between us. You heard the judge, Rebecca said firmly. No contact. Patricia's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, I saw the real her, the woman behind the mask. This isn't over, she hissed. You've turned my son against me. You've stolen my grandson. You'll pay for this. That's a threat, Rebecca said calmly, in front of witnesses. Would you like me to report it to the judge? Patricia turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. I watched her go and felt something like pity mixed with my relief. She destroyed so much in her obsession, including her relationship with her son and grandson. And for what? Control? Love? Some twisted combination of both? The next few months were about rebuilding. Tyler came home to me full time, with visits to Daniel every other weekend. The first night he was back permanently, I made his favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, and we ate together at the kitchen table. "Mommy," he said, his face serious, "are you and Daddy not going to be married anymore?" "No." "Sweetie," I said gently, "we're not, but we both love you so much, and that will never change." He nodded, processing this. "And Grandma?" "Why can't I see Grandma?" I chose my words carefully. "Grandma made some mistakes. She needs to work on some things. But maybe someday, when she's ready, you'll be able to see her again." I didn't tell him the truth, that his grandmother had tried to take him from me, that she'd nearly succeeded. He was too young to understand that kind of betrayal. Maybe someday I'd tell him. Or maybe he'd figure out on his own. I started therapy with Tyler, play therapy with a child psychologist who could help him process the divorce and the changes in his life. I continued my own therapy with Dr. Chun. I started rebuilding my life in Millbrook, even though part of me wanted to leave, to start over somewhere new. But Tyler's school was here. His friends were here, and I wasn't going to let Patricia drive me away from the life I'd built. Slowly, things got better. Some of the neighbors who'd shunned me started speaking to me again. Margaret and Linda became real friends, bonded by what we'd been through. The school staff, once they understood what had really happened, became supportive. I got a part-time job at the local library, something that got me out of the house and connected me to the community. Daniel and I learned to co-parent, though it was awkward and painful. He'd been ordered to attend therapy, too, to work through his enmeshment with his mother. I don't know if he ever really understood what he'd done, what he'd allowed to happen, but he was trying to be a better father to Tyler, and I had to respect that. Patricia, I heard through the grapevine, had become something of a pariah in Millbrook. Once the truth came out about what she'd done, people were horrified. The woman who'd been so respected, so admired, was revealed to be manipulative and cruel. She completed her court-ordered evaluation, which had diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder and recommended extensive therapy. She'd started the therapy, but I had no idea if she was actually changing or just going through the motions. 6 months after the custody hearing, I got a letter from her. It came in the mail, a cream-colored envelope with my name written in her perfect handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, and the words were brief. "Emma," it read, "I owe you an apology. I've been in therapy, and I'm beginning to understand the harm I caused. I was wrong to try to take Tyler from you. I was wrong to manipulate Daniel. I was wrong to turn the town against you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I hope someday Tyler will want to know me again. I hope someday you can believe that I'm trying to change. Patricia." I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden meanings, for some trap. But it seemed genuine. Or maybe I just wanted it to be genuine. I showed it to Dr. Chun in our next session. "What do you want to do with this?" She asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to believe she's really changing. Part of me thinks this is just another strategy." "You don't have to decide right now," Dr. Chun said. "You can sit with this. You can wait and see if her actions match her words. You're in control now, Emma. You get to set the boundaries." So I waited. I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. I put it in a drawer and focused on my life, on Tyler, on healing. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal. Tyler and I planted a garden in the backyard, tomatoes and peppers and herbs. We'd go out in the evenings and water the plants, and he'd tell me about his day, and I'd feel grateful for these simple moments that Patricia had tried to steal from me. A year after the custody hearing, Daniel asked if we could meet for coffee. Not about Tyler, he said. About us. About everything that happened. I agreed, curious about what he wanted to say. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, neutral territory. He looked different, thinner, older. The past year had aged him. "Emma," he said, stirring his coffee without drinking it, "I owe you an apology, a real one. I've been in therapy, working through a lot of things, and I'm starting to understand how badly I failed you, how I let my mother manipulate me, how I chose her over you, over our marriage, over the truth. I listened, not sure what to say. Part of me had wanted to hear this for so long. Part of me didn't care anymore. I was raised by her," he continued, "just the two of us after my dad died. And she made me believe that her love was conditional, that I had to choose her, that anyone else in my life was a threat to our bond. I didn't see it as abuse. I thought it was normal. I thought it was love." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were red. "I destroyed our marriage because I couldn't see past her manipulation. And I almost let her destroy you. I almost let her take Tyler. I'll never forgive myself for that." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. "Daniel," I said finally, "I appreciate the apology. I do. But an apology doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give me back the year of hell I went through. It doesn't erase the fact that you stood by while your mother tried to destroy me. I know," he said quietly. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what she did. I see what I did. And I'm trying to be better. For Tyler's sake, if nothing else." We talked for another hour, and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Maybe ever. He told me he'd cut off contact with Patricia, that he couldn't have a relationship with her until she'd done serious work on herself. He told me he was dating someone new, a woman from the next town over who didn't know his mother, who was helping him establish healthy boundaries. He asked about my life, and I told him about my job, my friends, my garden. We were like strangers getting to know each other, which I suppose we were. When we left the cafe, he hugged me, and it felt like goodbye, not to co-parenting, not to our connection through Tyler, but to whatever we'd once been to each other. The marriage was truly over, and we were both moving on. That summer, Tyler turned 6. I threw him a birthday party in our backyard, and it was full of kids from school and neighbors and friends. Margaret and Linda helped me set up, and we laughed as we hung streamers and filled water balloons. Daniel came with his new girlfriend, a kind woman named Sarah who brought a thoughtful gift and didn't try too hard. Tyler ran around with his friends, his face sticky with cake, his laugh ringing out across the yard. I watched him and felt a fierce pride. We'd made it through. We'd survived. As the party wound down and parents came to collect their children, Margaret pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "when I first met you, I thought you were standoffish. Cold. That's what Patricia had told us. And I believed her. But you're not cold. You're strong. You survived something that would have broken a lot of people. I'm proud to call you my friend." I hugged her, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Thank you," I said, "for testifying, for standing up for me, for seeing the truth. That's what friends do," she said simply. After everyone left and Tyler was in bed, exhausted and happy, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and looked at the stars. The night air was warm and smelled like cut grass and the jasmine growing along the fence. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the fear, the fight. And I thought about where I was now, stronger, wiser, free. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Rebecca, just checking in. "How are you doing?" "I'm good," I typed back. "Really good." And I meant it. I was good. Not perfect, not without scars, but good. I'd faced down someone who tried to destroy me, and I'd won. Not just in court, but in life. I had my son. I had my home. I had friends and a job, and a future that was mine to shape. 2 years after the custody hearing, Patricia requested supervised visitation with Tyler. Her therapist had written a letter stating she'd made significant progress, that she understood the harm she'd caused, that she was ready to begin rebuilding a relationship with her grandson. The request went before Judge Morrison, who called me in to discuss it. "Mrs. Walker," the judge said, "this is ultimately your decision. The court order gives you the authority to determine if and when Patricia Walker can see Tyler. What are your thoughts? I'd been thinking about this for weeks, ever since I received notice of Patricia's request. I'd talked to Dr. Chun, to Rebecca, to Daniel. I'd even talked to Tyler, in age-appropriate terms, about whether he wanted to see his grandmother. He'd said yes, but with the caveat that he wanted me there. He remembered her, but he was wary, sensing somehow that she was complicated. I think supervised visitation is appropriate. I told the judge, short visits, in a neutral location with me present. If those go well, we can reassess. But I need to see real change, sustained change, before I'll consider anything more. Judge Morrison nodded approvingly. That seems very reasonable. I'll approve supervised visitation 1 hour per week, at a location of your choosing, with you present. We'll review the arrangement in 6 months. The first visit was at a park, neutral ground where Tyler could play if things got awkward. Patricia arrived exactly on time, and I saw immediately that she looked different. Older, yes, but also softer somehow. Less armored. She approached us slowly, and I saw her hand shaking. "Hello, Tyler," she said, and her voice was gentle. "I've missed you." Tyler looked at me for reassurance, and I nodded. "It's okay," I told him. "You can say hi to Grandma." "Hi, Grandma," he said, and then he ran off to the swings. Patricia watched him go, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said to me, "for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it." We sat on a bench, and I watched Tyler play while Patricia talked. She told me about her therapy, about the work she'd been doing to understand her behavior. She talked about her own childhood, about her mother who'd been cold and critical, about her husband's death when Daniel was young, about the fear and loneliness that had driven her to cling too tightly to her son and then to her grandson. She didn't make excuses, but she offered context. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, echoing Daniel's words from a year earlier. "I'm just asking for a chance to be in Tyler's life in a healthy way. To be a grandmother, not a—" She paused. "Not whatever I was trying to be before." I looked at her, this woman who'd nearly destroyed me, and I tried to find compassion. It wasn't easy. The wounds were still there, still tender, but I could see she was trying. And for Tyler's sake, I wanted to believe people could change. "We'll take it slow," I said, "one visit at a time. And if you ever try to undermine me again, if you ever make Tyler feel like he has to choose, if you ever cross a boundary, this ends permanently. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. "And Emma," she looked at me directly, "I am sorry. Truly, I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have." The visits continued, weekly, then bi-weekly. Patricia was careful, respectful of boundaries, appropriate with Tyler. She brought small gifts, nothing extravagant, and she asked about his life without prying. She was polite to me, even kind. It was strange, building a new relationship with someone who'd been my enemy. But for Tyler's sake, I tried. After 6 months, Judge Morrison reviewed the arrangement and approved unsupervised visits, short ones, with the understanding that I could revoke them at any time if concerns arose. Patricia cried when she heard the news, and I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Tyler could have his grandmother back. Wariness that this could all be an act. Hope that maybe, just maybe, people really could change. Tyler was 7 when he asked me about what had happened. We were in the car, driving home from school, and out of nowhere he said, "Mommy, why couldn't I see Grandma for a long time?" I'd been preparing for this question, but it still caught me off guard. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the car, then turned to face him. "Grandma made some mistakes," I said carefully. "She hurt people's feelings, including mine, and she had to work on being a better person before she could be around you again." "Did she hurt you?" he asked, his eyes wide and serious. "Yes," I said honestly. "She did, but she's been working very hard to change, and I think she's doing better now." He thought about this. "Do you forgive her?" I paused, considering. "I'm working on it," I said. "Forgiveness is hard, especially when someone hurts you badly. But I'm trying, because I think it's important. And because she's your grandma, and you love her." He nodded, satisfied with this answer, and we went inside. But the question stayed with me. Did I forgive Patricia? Could I? I brought it up with Dr. Chun in our next session. I don't know if I can forgive her. I admit it. Part of me still hates her for what she did, for what she almost took from me. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Dr. Chin said. It's not about saying what she did was okay. It's about releasing the hold that anger has on you. It's about choosing peace over resentment. And it's a process, not a destination. You don't have to forgive her today or tomorrow or ever, but you can work toward it, if that's what you want. I thought about that a lot over the next few months. About anger and resentment and peace. About what I wanted my life to look like. What I wanted to model for Tyler. And slowly, gradually, I felt the anger loosening its grip. I didn't forget what Patricia had done. I didn't trust her completely. But I stopped letting it consume me. I stopped giving her that power over my emotions. 3 years after the custody hearing, I met someone. His name was Marcus, and he was a teacher at Tyler's school, though not Tyler's teacher. He was kind and funny and had no connection to Patricia or the drama that had consumed my life. We started dating slowly, carefully, both of us cautious about bringing someone new into Tyler's life. But Tyler liked him, and Marcus was patient and understanding about my history, about my wariness. Daniel had married Sarah by then, and they were expecting a baby. Tyler was excited about having a sibling, and I was happy for them, genuinely happy. We'd found a way to co-parent that worked, built on respect and communication, and putting Tyler first. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and that was enough. Patricia was a regular part of Tyler's life now, seeing him every other week, attending his school events, being a grandmother. She and I were cordial, even friendly on good days. She'd met Marcus and been polite, even complimentary. She'd sent me a card on Mother's Day with a note that said, "You're a wonderful mother. Tyler is lucky to have you." I cried when I read it, releasing years of pain in those tears. On a warm evening in late spring, 5 years after that terrible Tuesday morning when Patricia had shown up at my door with her army of neighbors, I sat on my back porch with Marcus. Tyler was at Daniel's for the weekend, and the house was quiet. We were drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You've been through a lot," Marcus said, taking my hand. "But you came through it. You're one of the strongest people I know." I didn't feel strong back then, I admitted. I felt like I was drowning, like everything was falling apart and I couldn't stop it. "But you did stop it," he said. "You fought back. You protected your son. You rebuilt your life. That's strength, Emma." I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, and thought about how far I'd come. From that terrified woman standing in her kitchen while her mother-in-law threatened to take her child, to this moment, peaceful and secure and loved. It had been a long journey, painful and difficult, but I'd made it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Having fun with Dad and Sarah. Baby sister kicked. Can't wait to tell you about it tomorrow. Love you, Mom." I smiled and texted back. "Love you too, sweetheart. Have fun. See you tomorrow." Marcus read over my shoulder and grinned. "He's a great kid. You did that. Despite everything, you raised a happy, healthy, loving child." "We did that," I corrected. "Me and Daniel. Even when we were falling apart. And Tyler himself, for being resilient and adaptable. But yeah, I'm proud of him. I'm proud of us." As the sun set and the stars began to appear, I thought about Patricia, about whether she was looking at the same sky, whether she felt peace or regret or some combination of both. I thought about Daniel and Sarah and the new baby coming, about the family we'd all become, fractured and reconfigured, but still connected through Tyler. I thought about Margaret and Linda and the other friends I'd made, about the community that had once rejected me, but had eventually accepted me. I thought about Dr. Chun and Rebecca and all the people who'd helped me survive. And I thought about myself, about the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. Stronger, yes. Wiser, definitely. But also more compassionate. More understanding of how complicated people could be, how trauma and fear could twist love into something destructive. I'd learned that not everything was what it seemed, that people wore masks, that small towns could be cruel but also kind. I'd learned that I was capable of fighting for what mattered, of standing up even when I was terrified, of rebuilding from ruins. Marcus, and I went inside as the air grew cool, and I locked the door behind us. A simple gesture that felt symbolic. I was safe now. Tyler was safe. We'd survived the storm, and while the scars remained, they were healing. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, shaped by my choices, protected by my strength, filled with people who loved me for who I was. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, the kind of sleep that comes from peace, from knowing you fought your battles and won the ones that mattered. And when I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my window and birds singing outside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, un complicated happiness. Tyler came home that afternoon, bursting with stories about his weekend, about feeling the baby kick, about the movie they'd watched, about the pancakes Dad had made for breakfast. I listened to every word, soaking in his joy, his innocence, his love. This was what I'd fought for. This moment and all the moments to come. This child, happy and whole in mine. Later that week, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. It was the first time we'd been alone together since the custody hearing, and for a moment we both froze. Then she smiled tentatively, and I smiled back. We made small talk about Tyler, about the weather, about nothing important. And then, as we were about to part ways, she touched my arm gently. "Emma," she said, and her voice was soft. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for everything. You're a wonderful mother, and Tyler is thriving because of you. I was wrong to try to take that from you. I was wrong about so many things." I looked at her, this woman who'd been my nightmare, and I saw just a person, flawed, damaged, trying to be better. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that. And Patricia," I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I'm glad you're in Tyler's life now, in a healthy way. He needs his grandmother." Her eyes filled with tears. "That means more than you know," she said. We parted ways, and I continued my shopping, feeling lighter somehow. I'd never forget what she'd done. I'd never fully trust her, but I could coexist with her, could allow her to be part of Tyler's life, could even feel a measure of compassion for her. That felt like victory, like the final piece of healing falling into place. Marcus and I got engaged that fall. It was a simple proposal, just the two of us on a hike, with him getting down on one knee on an overlook with the autumn leaves blazing around us. Tyler was thrilled, having already bonded with Marcus, already calling him his bonus dad. Daniel and Sarah sent congratulations, genuine and warm. Even Patricia sent a card with a heartfelt message about wishing us happiness. We planned a small wedding for the following spring, just family and close friends. Tyler would be the ring bearer, a role he took very seriously, practicing his walk down the aisle in our living room until he had it perfect. I watched him practice and felt my heart swell with love and gratitude. This child, who'd been at the center of such ugliness, such conflict, was happy and secure and excited about our growing family. That was everything. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my room, looking at my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. My first wedding had been big and traditional in Millbrook, with Patricia orchestrating everything. This wedding would be different, smaller, more intimate, more us. I thought about the woman I'd been then, young and naive and so hopeful. I thought about everything that had happened since, the pain and betrayal and fight. And I thought about who I was now, scarred but strong, wary but still capable of love, protective but not closed off. There was a soft knock on my door, and Margaret came in with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Thought you might want some company," she said, grinning. "Last night, as a single woman and all that, we sat on my bed, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her own marriage, the ups and downs, the work it took to make it last. She told me how proud she was of me, of how I'd survived and thrived. And then she said something that stuck with me. 'You know what I admire most about you?' she said. 'You didn't let what Patricia did make you bitter. You didn't let it close your heart. You're still open, still willing to love, still willing to trust. That takes real courage.' I didn't feel courageous," I said. "I felt like I was just surviving, just putting one foot in front of the other. That's what courage is," she said. "It's not the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. And you did that. You're doing that." After she left, I sat with those words. Courage. I'd never thought of myself as courageous. But maybe she was right. Maybe surviving, rebuilding, loving again after betrayal, that was its own kind of bravery. The wedding was perfect. The sun shone. The flowers bloomed. And Tyler walked down the aisle with the rings like he'd been born for the role. Marcus and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising partnership and respect and love. Daniel and Sarah were there, with their baby daughter, who Tyler adored. Patricia was there too, sitting quietly in the back, smiling but not intruding. Margaret and Linda were my bridesmaids, standing beside me as I married the man who'd helped me believe in love again. At the reception, Tyler gave a toast that he'd written himself with some help from his teacher. My mom is the best mom in the world, he said, his voice clear and confident. She's strong and kind, and she always makes me feel safe. And Marcus is really cool, too. He taught me how to throw a curveball. I'm happy we're going to be a family. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. I hugged Tyler tight, this child who'd been through so much, who'd remained loving and open despite the adult conflicts swirling around him. He was my greatest achievement, my biggest victory, my reason for everything. Later, as Marcus and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I looked around the room at all the people who'd been part of my journey, the friends who'd stood by me, the family that had been reconfigured and rebuilt, the community that had eventually embraced me, and I felt overwhelming gratitude, not for the pain, never for that, but for what I'd learned, who I'd become, the strength I'd discovered in myself. Patricia approached me later in the evening, when I was alone for a moment getting some air outside. I tensed instinctively. Old habits dying hard, but she held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. I just wanted to say congratulations, she said, and to thank you, again, for letting me be part of Tyler's life, for giving me a chance to be better. We stood in silence for a moment, and then I said something I'd been thinking about for a long time. Patricia, what you did nearly destroyed me. It did destroy my marriage to Daniel, and I'll never forget that. But I can see you're trying to change, and I respect that. For Tyler's sake, I'm willing to move forward. But I need you to understand that trust is earned, slowly, over time, and it can be lost in an instant. I understand, she said. And Emma, I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know why I did what I did. Not as an excuse, but as an explanation. When my husband died, Daniel was all I had. I poured everything into him, all my love, all my fear, all my need for control. And when he grew up and married you, I felt like I was losing him. And then Tyler came, and I saw a chance to, she paused, to do it all over again, to have that purpose, that love, that control. I didn't see it as wrong. I saw it as love. But it wasn't love. It was obsession. It was sickness. And I'm sorry. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me that. And Patricia, I hope you find peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from controlling others, but the kind that comes from within. She smiled sadly. I'm working on it. And Emma, you deserve all the happiness in the world. You're a remarkable woman. She went back inside, and I stood alone under the stars, feeling the cool night air on my skin, hearing the music and laughter from the reception. I thought about forgiveness, about healing, about the long road I'd traveled from that terrible Tuesday morning to this beautiful evening. And I realized that I had forgiven her, not completely, not without reservations, but enough. Enough to let go of the anger that had weighed me down. Enough to move forward without that burden. Marcus found me outside and wrapped his arms around me from behind. You okay? He asked, his breath warm against my ear. I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We went back inside together, back to the celebration, back to our friends and family, and the life we were building. And as I danced with Tyler, his small feet standing on mine like when he was a toddler, I felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, not because all wounds were healed, but because I'd fought for this. I'd fought for my son, for my dignity, for my right to be a mother, and I'd won. The years that followed were good ones. Marcus and I built a life together, blending our families, creating new traditions. Tyler thrived, growing into a confident, kind young man who knew he was loved by multiple parents and step-parents, and even a grandmother who'd learned to love him in a healthier way. Daniel and Sarah had 2 more children, and Tyler was a devoted big brother to all of them. Patricia remained in our lives, carefully, respectfully, always aware of the boundaries that had been set. I continued working at the library, eventually becoming the head librarian, a position that gave me purpose and connection to the community. Marcus continued teaching, inspiring young minds, including Tyler's when he eventually had him as a teacher in middle school. We bought a bigger house with a yard big enough for the garden I'd always wanted, and I spent weekends with my hands in the soil, growing things, nurturing life. On Tyler's 10th birthday, he asked if we could have a family party with everyone. Everyone meant me and Marcus, Daniel and Sarah and the kids. And yes, Patricia. It was the first time we'd all been together in one place since the wedding, and I was nervous. But Tyler wanted it. And I'd learned that sometimes you had to be uncomfortable for the sake of the people you loved. The party was in our backyard, and it was chaotic and loud and wonderful. Kids ran everywhere, adults chatted and laughed, and Tyler was in the middle of it all, beaming. At one point, I found myself standing next to Patricia, both of us watching Tyler open presents. "He's a special kid," Patricia said softly. "You've done an amazing job with him." "We've all done our part," I said, and I meant it. It takes a village, right? She looked at me with something like wonder. "You're very gracious, Emma. More gracious than I deserve." I shrugged. "I'm just trying to do what's best for Tyler. And holding on to anger doesn't serve anyone." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Tyler called us over to see his new bike. We went together, and I realized that this complicated, imperfect, blended family was what healing looked like. It wasn't neat or simple. It wasn't without scars or awkward moments. But it was real, and it was ours. That night, after everyone had gone home and Tyler was asleep, exhausted from his party, Marcus and I cleaned up the backyard. We picked up paper plates and deflated balloons, and he told me how proud he was of me, of how I'd handled the day, of how I'd created space for everyone to be part of Tyler's life. It wasn't easy, I admitted, having Patricia here, pretending everything is normal. But it's not about me. It's about Tyler. And he deserves to have all of us in his life, as long as we can be healthy and respectful. "You're an incredible mother," Marcus said, pulling me close. "And an incredible person. Tyler is lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have you." I leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and home. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 years ago, terrified and alone, fighting for a child against impossible odds. I thought about how far I'd come, how much I'd grown, how much I'd survived. And I felt proud, not arrogant, just quietly, deeply proud of myself for not giving up, for fighting back, for rebuilding. When Tyler was 12, he had to do a school project about someone who inspired him. He chose me. He interviewed me, asking questions about my life, my challenges, what I'd overcome. I tried to keep it age appropriate, not wanting to burden him with the full truth of what had happened with Patricia. But he was smart, and he'd pieced together more than I'd realized. "Mom," he said during the interview, "I know Grandma Patricia tried to take me away from you when I was little. I know there was a big fight, and you had to go to court. I was stunned. How do you know that?" I asked. He shrugged. "I've heard things over the years. And I asked Dad about it once. He told me some of it. Not everything, but enough." I took a deep breath. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Why did she do it?" He asked. "Why did she want to take me from you?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "She was hurting," I said finally. "She'd lost her husband, and she was afraid of losing her son, your dad. And when you were born, she loved you so much that it became unhealthy. She wanted to control everything, including you. But that's not love, Tyler. Real love means wanting what's best for the other person, even if it's not what you want. Real love means respecting boundaries and trusting people to make their own choices." He nodded, processing this. "Are you still mad at her?" he asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "When I remember how scared I was, how close I came to losing you, I feel angry. But mostly, I just feel sad for her. She missed out on so much because she couldn't let go of control. And I feel grateful that she's worked on herself, that she's been able to be a good grandmother to you now. Do you think she's really changed? He asked. I think she's trying, I said. And that's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were yesterday. He used that quote in his project. And when he presented it to his class, I sat in the audience and cried. He talked about my strength, my resilience, my love. He talked about how I'd fought for him, how I'd never given up, how I'd taught him that you could survive hard things and come out stronger. His teacher told me afterward that there wasn't a dry eye in the room. That project sits framed in my office now, a reminder of why I fought, what I was fighting for. Tyler's words, his perspective on our story, mean more to me than any court victory or apology ever could, because he sees me as strong, as loving, as someone worth admiring. And that's the greatest gift a child can give a parent. Patricia's health began to decline when Tyler was 14. She was diagnosed with heart disease, and while it was manageable, it was a reminder of mortality, of time running out. She asked to meet with me, just the two of us, and I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, and she looked older, frilier, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Emma, she said, I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors say years, maybe with treatment, but I need to say some things while I still can. I listened as she talked about regret, about the years she'd wasted on control and manipulation, about the relationships she'd damaged. She talked about her therapy, about the insights she'd gained, about the person she'd been, and the person she was trying to become. I know I've apologized before, she said, but I need you to know that I understand now, truly understand what I did to you. I tried to destroy you. I tried to take your child. I turned people against you, made you doubt yourself, nearly broke you. And there's no excuse for that. No amount of therapy or insight or regret can undo that harm. No, I agree. It can't be undone, but it can be forgiven. And Patricia, I have forgiven you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. She cried then, real tears, not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use in past. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance to know Tyler. Thank you for being the bigger person. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. We talked for 2 hours, and it was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. She told me about her childhood, about abuse and neglect that had shaped her into someone who needed control to feel safe. She told me about her marriage, about loving her husband but also feeling trapped by him. She told me about raising Daniel alone, about the fear that had driven her to hold on too tight. And I listened, not to excuse her behavior, but to understand it. When we parted, she hugged me, and I hugged her back. It felt like closure, like the final chapter of a long, painful story. I drove home feeling lighter, feeling like I'd finally, truly let go of the past. Patricia lived for another 5 years, long enough to see Tyler graduate high school, long enough to meet Marcus's and my daughter, born when I was 40 and thought I was done having children. She was a good grandmother to both kids, present but not overbearing, loving but respectful of boundaries. She and I developed a relationship that was cordial, even warm at times. We'd never be close. The wounds were too deep for that. But we found a way to coexist peacefully. When she died, it was sudden, a heart attack in her sleep. Daniel called me in the morning, his voice broken, and I went to him immediately. We sat in his kitchen, the same kitchen where Patricia had probably planned her campaign against me all those years ago, and we cried together for the woman she'd been, for the woman she'd become, for the complicated legacy she'd left behind. At the funeral, I gave a eulogy. Daniel had asked me to, saying that my perspective, my forgiveness, was an important part of Patricia's story. I stood at the podium and looked out at the faces of people who'd known her for decades, who'd been part of the town that had turned against me at her direction, and I told the truth. Patricia Walker was a complicated woman. I began. She was capable of great love and great harm. She made mistakes, serious ones that hurt people she cared about, but she was also capable of change, of growth, of redemption. In her final years, she worked hard to become a better person, to make amends for the pain she'd caused. And while she couldn't undo the past, she could and did create a better future. She was a devoted grandmother to my son Tyler and my daughter Lily. She was a mother who loved her son, even when that love was expressed imperfectly. And she was a woman who taught me, through her mistakes and her efforts to correct them, that people are capable of change if they're willing to do the work. I saw people crying, saw Daniel nodding, saw Tyler sitting with his arm around Lily, both of them understanding in their own ways the complexity of the woman we were mourning. And I felt at peace with my words, with my role in Patricia's life, with the journey we'd all taken together. After the funeral, many people approached me to apologize for their role in what had happened years ago. Neighbors who'd shunned me, teachers who doubted me, community members who believed Patricia's lies. I accepted their apologies with grace, understanding that they too had been manipulated, that Patricia's influence had been powerful and pervasive. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't just for the person who'd wronged you. It was for everyone caught in the web of hurt. That night, I sat with Marcus and the kids, and we talked about Patricia, about memory, about legacy. Tyler shared stories of his grandmother, the good times they'd had in recent years. Lily, who was only 5, talked about how Grandma Patricia had taught her to bake cookies. And I listened, grateful that my children had positive memories of her, that the woman she'd become had been able to give them that gift. You did a good thing, Marcus said later, when the kids were in bed, letting her back into our lives, giving her a chance to be better. A lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that. I did it for Tyler, I said, and for myself, because I didn't want to be the kind of person who held on to hate forever. I wanted to be someone who could forgive, who could move forward, who could find peace. He kissed my forehead. You're all those things and more. Now, years later, Tyler is in college, studying to be a social worker. He says he wants to help families in crisis, to be the kind of person who intervenes in healthy ways, who supports rather than manipulates. I see the influence of our story in his choice, and I'm proud of how he's taken something painful and turned it into purpose. Lily is 10, bright and confident, and loved by a family that, while unconventional, is solid and strong. She knows the story of what happened with Patricia, age appropriately, and she understands that families can be complicated, but that love and forgiveness can heal even deep wounds. Marcus and I are still happy, still building our life together. We've had our challenges, as all couples do, but we face them as partners, with communication and respect and trust. He's never given me reason to doubt him, never chosen someone else over me, never made me feel like I was fighting alone. That's what a real partnership looks like, and I'm grateful for it every day. Daniel and I have a good co-parenting relationship now, built on years of work and therapy and mutual respect. He's apologized countless times for his role in what happened, and I've accepted those apologies. We're not friends, exactly, but we're friendly. We attend Tyler's events together, celebrate holidays and shifts, and put our son's needs above our own egos. Sarah's been a wonderful stepmother to Tyler, and I'm grateful for her presence in his life. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when I'm alone with my thoughts, I think back to that Tuesday morning when my life changed forever. I think about the woman I was then, scared and isolated and under attack. And I think about the woman I am now, strong and secure and surrounded by love. The journey between those two versions of myself was long and painful, but it was worth it, because I didn't just survive. I thrived. I learned that not everything is what it seems, that people can wear masks, that small towns can be cruel, that family can be your greatest threat or your greatest support. I learned that I was stronger than I ever knew, that I could fight for what mattered, that I could rebuild from ruins. I learned about forgiveness, not as a gift to the person who wronged you, but as a gift to yourself. I learned that healing isn't linear, that some scars never fully fade, but that you can build a beautiful life anyway. Most importantly, I learned that love, real love, isn't about control or possession. It's about respect and trust and letting go. It's about wanting the best for someone even when it's not what you want. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard. It's about fighting for what matters and having the wisdom to know when to stop fighting and start healing. Tyler calls me every Sunday from college. We talk about his classes, his friends, his dreams for the future. And every conversation ends the same way. Love you, Mom. Thanks for everything. Those words, simple as they are, mean everything, because they tell me that despite everything we went through, despite the battles and the pain and the complexity, I succeeded in the thing that mattered most. I raised a child who feels loved, who knows he's valued, who understands that he was worth fighting for. That's my legacy. Not the court victory, not the forgiveness I extended, not the life I rebuilt. My legacy is Tyler and now Lily, two children who know they're loved unconditionally, who've seen that families can be complicated, but that love can prevail, who understand that strength isn't about never falling down, but about getting back up. On the anniversary of that terrible Tuesday, I always take a moment to reflect. I sit in my backyard, in the garden I've tended for years, and I think about the journey. I think about Patricia, about Daniel, about all the people who played roles in that chapter of my life. And I feel gratitude, not for the pain, never for that, but for what it taught me, who it made me, the strength it revealed. I'm 50 now, and I look at my life with satisfaction. I have a career I love, a husband who cherishes me, children who make me proud, friends who support me, and a community that respects me. I have peace, hard-won and deeply valued. I have forgiveness, extended to others and to myself. I have wisdom, earned through suffering and reflection. And I have hope for my children's futures, for my own continued growth, for the possibility that even the most broken things can be mended. Sometimes people ask me how I survived what Patricia did to me, how I didn't break, didn't give up, didn't let the cruelty destroy me. And I tell them the truth. I survived because I had to, because Tyler needed me, because giving up wasn't an option. But more than that, I survived because I chose to. I chose to fight, to document, to seek help, to believe in myself even when no one else did. I chose to forgive, to heal, to move forward. I chose life over bitterness, love over hate, hope over despair. Those choices weren't easy. There were days I wanted to give up, nights I cried myself to sleep, moments I doubted everything. But I kept choosing day after day to be the person I wanted to be, to create the life I wanted to live, to give my children the mother they deserved. And those choices, accumulated over years, built the life I have now. If I could go back and talk to that terrified woman standing in her kitchen while Patricia threatened to take her child, I'd tell her this. You're stronger than you know. You're going to survive this. It's going to be hard, harder than anything you've ever faced, but you're going to make it through. And on the other side, you're going to find a life more beautiful than you can imagine. You're going to find yourself, your real self, the strong, capable, loving woman you were always meant to be. So hold on. Keep fighting. Don't give up, because you're worth fighting for. And so is your son. And the life you're going to build together is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear. That's what I'd tell her. That's what I'd tell anyone facing their own Patricia, their own battle, their own moment of crisis. You're stronger than you know. You can survive this. And on the other side of survival is a life worth living. As I sit here now in my garden, with the sun warm on my face and the smell of roses in the air, I feel complete. Not because everything is perfect, but because I've made peace with imperfection. Not because all wounds are healed, but because I've learned to live with scars. Not because I've forgotten the past, but because I've integrated it into my story without letting it define me. I am Emma Walker, mother, wife, librarian, survivor, forgiver, fighter. I am a woman who faced down her worst nightmare and came out stronger. I am a woman who learned that not everything is what it seems, but that truth and love and courage can prevail. I am a woman who built a beautiful life from the ruins of a broken one. And I am proud of who I've become, of the journey I've taken, of the choices I've made. This is my story. It's a story of betrayal and survival, of pain and healing, of hate and forgiveness. It's a story of a mother's love, of a woman's strength, of a family's resilience. It's a story that's uniquely mine, but also universal. Because we all face battles, we all have scars, we all have to choose between bitterness and healing. Ishozeling. And that has made all the difference.